Yeah, he can cover it all. So I'm not a coach, but I would consider myself kind of a hacklete. Like I'm an athlete, but I'm a hack at it. I just figure things out. You know, beach volleyball with Josiah and Sarah, and little me running around just trying to get all the balls there. But I appreciate so much sports. And the reason is I have 4 kids, and they're all involved in all playing sports. So last night probably was one of my best sport highlight memories of all time. And God may have ordained last week's snow to punt to today so that I could share what happened last night with you guys, and it is related to where we're going in this little talk. So Ava is my oldest. She's a 16-year-old. She goes to South River High School. Her main sport is lacrosse, but she's into fun and socializing and wanting to spread the love around, so she wanted to play basketball. So never having any basketball experience outside of like PE at school, she makes the team. She makes the JV team as a sophomore, and she shoots bricks. I mean, she clangs the rim, and when one goes in, it's amazing. But she plays because she's a defensive specialist, she's tenacious, and a ball hawk, and can strip the ball. So it's been fun watching her play. Last night, they played Severna Park at Arundel High School for the county championship. And we were down 15 points at the half, something like that. It wasn't looking good. I was sitting in one place in the first half, so I moved, I sit in another place, I try to change the whole vibe up, you know, doing my parent thing. And then little by little, the girls, they start just slowly clawing back. But even when there was 2 minutes left in the game, I think we were still down by 10. But then it came down to the last 30 seconds or so, we're down by 5, and just by way of some fouling that the Severna Park girls didn't make their shots and our girls did, came down to the last 9 seconds of the game. Last 9 seconds of the game last night, I still have the adrenaline running through my veins. Last 9 seconds, we need to score on this hoop, but we're inbounding the ball on that hoop. Inbound the ball with a nice little design play, set up by the coach, I'm sure. They take it down, miss the layup. With 2 seconds, the rebound comes down and our girl gets fouled. Now, it wasn't Ava, but at this point, they're all my girls, right? I'm locked in. 1 second left, foul shot, 2 shots, down by 1. It was 35-36 Severna Park's win. So our girl gets up there. She's kind of like a semi-starter, like not the best kid on the team, but she does pretty good. Ice in the veins, hits the first one. Place goes crazy. It's 36-36, 1 second left. She gets the ball back, hardly thinks about it, takes the shot, doinks off the back of the rim, and I'm like, oh, we're gonna go to overtime. But then, had a little backspin on it. That little backspin goes right down to the front of that rim, just enough to come back and go in. We go nuts. 1 second left. Severna Park can hardly get the ball down, and we win the county championship last night. And I gotta tell you, it felt like the Super Bowl.
I know that's right.
It, like, we're talking about girls JV basketball for a county. And in my body, I was celebrating like the Ravens just won the Super Bowl. It almost made up for the fact that they lost in the AFC Championship. And Lamar didn't play like Lamar. But as a parent, I was all in. And you start to understand and see how all-encompassing sport can be. Now, obviously, we're followers of Jesus and we want to build the kingdom, but I don't think we can underestimate how important this little huddle is in whatever way you're integrated, because the reality is when I go out, because now my kids are playing clubs and all of this other stuff, I see fields and fields and fields of men and women and boys and girls on Sunday mornings who traveled far and spent money and are investing in this life. And we have to meet them there. This is where the people are, and we have to meet them there. So how you integrate into sport is so very important. And when I think about that, I actually had a visual that came to mind. this week. And I felt like as a coach or as a perhaps ref and how you integrate, there's only certain things we can control. So this is obviously a half a window here. But this window represents what we can control. So maybe if you're a coach, this is your team or your player, and these are the things that you try to arrange and line up, and this is your game plan, and this is your strategy. And we can only really control one side of things when it comes to competition sports and our teams, but we want to do the best. Like we were having a chat about what makes a winning, what's successful. Was it winning? Is it losing? Obviously we want to win. Life is better when you win. Like there's coaches on Severna Park side waking up not feeling that great this morning, but the coaches on the South River side feeling awesome. But we can only control what we can control. And then there's this other window that slides in, and this window are the opportunities that come along and they meet your preparation and they slide in at a certain time to create this X. Now, you're sitting in the middle, you have the best seats in the house. But the idea here is that when your preparation and when your time and when your investment slides into this opportunity, if you can line it up right, you see the X. That X is the intersection of all your time, treasure, talent, labor pouring in. And then here's a game, here's an opportunity. Heck, it could even come down to a single play. If you want to think about it like this, you've set up this play as you got your quarterback in the game and he's got 4 different options. You're going to run these routes, but then everything else has to also fall into play. And then your quarterback is going to see that one window and try to hit that one window of time. You guys with me, tracking with me on that sports analogy? But I think there's something else at play here. More than just sports. We could use this for sports. We do what we do, and here comes the opportunities, the other teams and the games. And then sometimes the X is a completed pass. Sometimes the X is a well-executed play. You hit the 3, you get the end one or something like that. Ultimately, we want the X to be the win at the end of the day. Like, we got the win. That was the goal. Our team beat their team. We did it right. We got the win. But I think there's a layer here that's altogether important for us to grasp. And it's this, that this window also represents you in this place and in this time. And this window represents every individual that you are going to touch. And I don't think it's an accident that the kids who are maybe just trying out, getting the chance to play a sport. Maybe the kids who think they're going to make it all the way. Maybe the kids are being forced to be on the team because of discipline problems or what have you. Lots of different reasons, but I think it's absolutely brought about and ordained when your life slides into the life of a player or another coach. And the question is, what's the win? What's the X? Because we're going to have these relationships with the girls, the JV girls and the varsity girls and all the different teams and the coaches and the leaders. And obviously, we're sports people. I hope you're competitive enough to say, well, obviously the X is we want everybody to win, do better. But what is the X for us as people who don't just want to build a program or a sport or a championship culture, but we want to build the kingdom? And when I slow down and let myself think about the X, it's to help that person take the next right step of faith, whatever their next right step of faith is. And if I think about that for a second, I would ask, what would Jesus actually say is the X? And I feel like the X is actually that person, man or woman, boy or girl, would be obedient to Jesus And you're like, oh, that's kind of weird. Well, where does that come from? Obedient to Jesus. Sounds a little lame, sounds a little churchy. But I actually think that the most life-giving step we can help people take is the next step of obedience to Jesus. In fact, I would say that that's how we tell Jesus we love him back. I'd argue that if God had a love language in and of itself, it would be obedience. And I think Jesus himself says that. Time and time again in the upper room discourse, probably 4 or 5, maybe 6 times, Jesus says, if you love me, you will keep my commands. If you love me, you will obey the things I say. And when we think about that, it's not just the learning and the understanding and the knowing, but it's actually doing the things that he tells us to do. So then if I think about that, I'm like, okay, so here I am. I got all these things. I got pressure from the parents. I got pressure from the organization. We want to do well. I got all these little lives that I'm stewarding, and they're all crazy and in different places, and all of this. And guys, can I just acknowledge that I'm not exactly sure all of your stewardships in the coaching roles, but it is a stewardship because this is a role that pours out. Like, you guys are in so many ways having to shoulder a whole lot of expectation, a whole lot of drama, and everything in between. Would you agree with that? Yeah. So thanks, because I'm also a parent that's mumbling under my breath when my kids aren't there. They're like, "Come on, coach, I wouldn't do it that way." It's like you get the whole thing, and I can be a real jerk like that, even following Jesus. But here we are. Here we are with all these opportunities, with all of these perhaps kids, to hit that mark and help them take a step of obedience with Jesus. But probably the last thing that a student athlete perhaps wants to hear is talking about obedience to Jesus. Sounds lame. Don't really want to do that. Like, maybe my parents are putting that down my throat, or I'm hearing that being preached, and I don't really want to be about that. So I thought, what would be helpful for you guys to have in your back pocket, just a couple little nuggets of talking points of how I can actually help them take steps of faith and be obedient to Christ in their life. So I thought about four little areas to perhaps address in the context of the relationships you have, and I think about them in terms of talking points, because you might have a little team huddle. It could be a time for a talking point, or you might have a little one-on-one heart-to-heart, and you might have an opportunity for a talking point there. But these 4 talking points, they're designed to help that person get closer to and walk with Jesus. So this is where I just want to be super practical. Give you guys a couple scriptures in your back pocket. I can email these later to Sarah, and she can hit you guys up with them. I just wanted you guys to have something to walk away with that might be helpful as you're processing. The first idea here, I would say maybe it's like a myth that you can bust in their world, or just the undergirding for them to take a step of faith. The first thing is this: following Jesus, or taking him seriously, or obeying him, is not picking up more religious baggage. There's a conception or a misconception with a lot of people that if I'm going to take Jesus seriously, that means there's going to be a whole bunch of burden and rules that I'm going to have to sling on my back and walk around and carry around. Like, here's this religious stuff, and you just want me to pick this religious stuff up, and you want me to walk around with it, and that doesn't feel freeing, and that doesn't feel good. And I think there's times we can bust that myth. 2 key scriptures that I would keep in mind here are this. 1 John 5, which is later in the Bible, not the Gospel of John, but one of the passages that he writes in the smaller letters towards the back of the New Testament. He says this: "By this we know that we love the children of God, when we love God and obey his commandments." And so there's the big theme, like obeying Jesus, taking that next right step. But then he says, "For this is the love of God, that we keep his commandments, and his commandments are not burdensome." God never intended his rules or commands to be a burden to anyone. And so that's something that we really have to keep in mind. Jesus himself said, "Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest." He was saying that in the context of all these people who had all of these rules that they had to follow, man-made rules, religious rules, and Jesus said, "I want you to lay those things down. I want to give you rest." He goes on to say, "Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls." He says, "For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." So we might know that Jesus actually wants to take all of these things that we put on ourselves, and he wants to lift that burden, and he wants us to set that burden down. And I thought, well, how do you communicate that as a coach or to your team? Or like, how is that even done? And here's the talking point for this one. The talking point is, share a time in your life where you experience the freedom of grace. Like, where was it, or when was it, or how was it in your life where you realize, like, God actually wants me to be free from things I have to do to earn his love or to merit his attention or favor? And if we're walking with Jesus, then we all have experienced that somewhere. And so it could just be sharing a time where that felt good for you, that realization of grace, and you can share that from your heart. And that's not even like, and now go do this, guys, and now you have to do this, now you have to do that. It's simply sharing from your own walk and your own experience how you've intersected with grace. And if you haven't intersected with grace, and you're carrying a bunch of religious baggage around thinking, I gotta perform, I have to do, this is just a whole lot of heaping of commands, that might be a wake-up call. When's the last time you've really had a fresh experience of grace and laying something down and walking in the freedom that Jesus says that we can have? So that's one little talking point, keep in your back pocket, because a lot of the kids that we might intersect with are thinking Jesus equals religion, religion equals rules. And that's not the case. You with me on that first one? Little nugget, back pocket. Here's the second. The second is, and this is a big one, especially for kids coming up and seeing the world and scrolling through all the various activities that they could be a part of, and they're trying to figure out, their own worldview. And I get this as a parent, because you raise your kids to follow Jesus, and then you realize they're 16, you have no idea if they're going to follow Jesus. Like, we are not God, and we cannot, there is no silver bullet. I did this school, and I did this, camp, and I did all the right things, and now this. And now they're walking their own way. I think the second important thing to keep in mind, to communicate, maybe directly or in indirect ways, is that following Jesus, is not a cosmic buzzkill. Get what I'm saying here? There's this idea that if I'm going to take Jesus seriously, I'm going to have to strip everything back that's going to be fun in my life. And it's going to be lame, and it's going to be boring. And this is a myth that we have to bust. Because the world looks tantalizing, and all the crazy things that people are doing, that looks way more fun over there, what those people are doing. But that's simply not true. Because the world over here, they're trying to satisfy their souls in all kinds of different ways. And it seems like it's working at times, because that's what's being posted, and that's what they're scrolling through. But that's a cheap, false substitute for the true satisfaction of our souls. So here's a scripture that you can keep in mind in this regard. Jesus says this in the Upper Room Discourse in John's Gospel. He says, "As the Father has loved me, so I have loved you. Abide in my love." Here's our theme. If you keep my commandments, you will abide in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commandments and abide in his love. So Jesus is bringing up the theme, abide with me, obey my commandments, just like I'm obeying the Father's commandments. But the kicker here is the last verse in this little text in John 15, when Jesus says, "These things I have spoken to you." Why, Jesus? Why are you telling me about abide and love? Why are you telling me about obey commands? Why? He tells us why. "So that my joy may be in you, and your joy may be full." The reason, and this is important to communicate, the reason that Jesus wants us to take him seriously, obey his commands, whatever they might be at the time God's putting on our heart, is that his joy may be in us and our joy may be full. And what does that look like? Last night, full joy for me was screaming like a crazy person because a JV girl just made 2 baskets and I'm losing my mind. And that's a picture of full joy. And we have a Father in heaven who wants us to experience the fullness of joy. And at times it might come through a game or a sport, or we get the win, or we got the championship or whatever. And those are nice and good, and they're good things to pursue. We wouldn't be involved in sports at all if they weren't good things to pursue. But those things are fleeting ultimately. Those things don't last ultimately. When there's a win, there's also a loss. But that feeling of joy is actually what God wants for us. And he says it comes when we take those steps of faith and obey him. And that's a message to communicate. Guys, you're looking for actual satisfaction. You're looking for fun or excitement and joy that's not dependent on any of your circumstances. It comes from not just knowing about who Jesus is, but it comes from doing the thing Jesus said to do. And that also might be something missing in our life. Because I look around at a lot of Christians who look like they're just attending a perpetual funeral. Like everything is glum, everything is dreary, the world stinks, and everybody is, all the things. And I'm like, where's the joy in the Christian life? Like, maybe I got it at church for the song. They played the song I like, or the preacher did a good job, or something. Where's the joy in the Christian life? Like, most of us walk around like Jesus is still in the grave. Honestly. And it's not a very attractive group of people. But it doesn't have to be that way. But why isn't it that way? My theory is people aren't taking steps of faith. They're not taking steps of obedience. Because look, Jesus just said, obey me, practice the things that I'm telling you to do, and do those things so that you would have full joy. So if you're lacking joy in the Christian life, it might be a heart check personally that we might need to be taking some fresh steps of faith. Like, it may have been a minute since we've popped our church bubble and done something that Jesus might be calling us to do. Like, guarantee for Glenn, he had a little bit more joy this morning because he did the thing versus, maybe I'll get that guy's coffee, maybe not. Catch you later. But he did it, and probably your little joy meter had a little spike because you did it, not because you just left and didn't do it. So there's joy to be had in the Christian life, but that joy comes when we take Jesus seriously and keep and do the things that he says. Not a cosmic buzzkill, not missing out on fun. And that's a very hard thing to convince the people we coach or will coach and intersect with, that that's a reality of life. So a talking point there might be how God refreshes you and how you experience his joy in your life personally. They might be way more willing to hear it from you than I guarantee they want to hear it more they will hear it more from you than a parent. Because from a parent perspective, like, you guys get to interact with all these kids. And a word you speak to them for some crazy reason has way more potency in that moment than when they get home and their parent says the same thing. Because they're already writing the parent off. Like, I don't want to hear what you have to say. But coach said this thing, and it got me thinking a little bit differently. So you guys have a stewardship because you speak into these lives with a weightiness. And it's a stewardship, and it's a gift. And so maybe think about a talking point of, well, let me tell you where I'm experiencing the greatest joy. And it could even be, you had a miserable loss, team tanked, got in their heads throughout the game plan, what was happening out there. But after that game, if you step up and say, I got a joy in my heart right now. Why? That could be very powerful. as a talking point there. Okay, that's the second. Here's the third thing, and it intersects with our kids' identity and their purpose. And the third thing is, taking Jesus seriously is for you, coach. Or it's for Josiah, because he's like running the whole thing, works at a Christian school. Or it's for the FCA guy, because he's like professional ministry. Or it's for the preacher at the church, or whatever. Like, really obeying Jesus, like, those are for special people. That's for the elite. And you got to break that down, because that's a myth. And one key verse that I like to go here that comes into my mind is Ephesians 2:10. Ephesians 2:10 is an awesome verse. For we are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus. So there's our identity. Like, this is who we are. We are his workmanship. We have been crafted, assembled, manufactured, put together like a song or a poem. And it's been done by his grace. It's not the things that we did religiously. It's what he did for us on the cross. And now we're given this brand new identity. And it really informs like who we are. Because every kid out there is trying to figure out who they are. And they're trying to figure it out from their peer group. And they're trying to figure it out from the affirmation there, or they go all over the place. But ultimately, we know that our identity comes from our Creator. And who we are in Christ is the bedrock. And it's the starting place. And so we're his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus. But then interestingly, the way that verse goes on is, it says we're created in Christ Jesus for good works that God has prepared in advance for us to walk in. So that means on any given day, we're walking into a purpose that God has for us. And that gives us a pep in our step that makes us think a little bit differently about the intentionality of life and how my life does have meaning and it does have purpose. And just as your window is colliding with the window of opportunity with a game or a sport or even another person, every believer has these windows. Because as his workmanship is going along, thinking and listening and walking an authentic Christian life, then he brings other people and places and things along our path for a reason. And it gives life great purpose to think that even today, even as we break the huddle today, and it's like Saturday, so what are we going to go do? We're going to do this thing, got a little errand run, maybe we got to figure out what to do with the kids later, we're going to go bang those things into the house, all the random normalness of life. Packed inside of that are all these little micro purposes that God has for us. And it's for everybody. And that's actually pretty exciting for a kid who's thinking, I don't really know what I'm supposed to be doing or what I'm here for or who I really am. So a talking point here could be your modeling and sharing with them the things that God has put on your heart and where you're finding your purpose. Some things might be really big, some things might be a little small, but that could be a talking point, because I guarantee you, these kids that we get to shepherd and steward for a moment in time are trying to figure out who they are and what they're here for. And it's a pretty big deal. Which leads us to our last talking point, last myth to bust, if you will, about taking Jesus seriously. And it's this one. All the other things being true, taking Jesus more seriously today than you did tomorrow is not picking up religious baggage. It's not signing up for no fun in your life. And it's not just for the professionals, but the fourth one is this, and it's taking Jesus seriously is not going to be easy. Because there's this other idea that this is going to be puppies and rainbows. This is going to be great. I'm going to be showered with gifts and showered with blessings because I'm going to take Jesus more seriously in my life, and we know that that is simply not true. Will you have a joy? Yes. And a peace that passes all understanding? Absolutely. And that's what we're in it for. Ultimately, to walk closely with him is what we're here to do. But that doesn't mean it's going to be easy, because we follow a crucified king. And no servant is above his master. And if they try to take Jesus out, at some point you're going to feel like they're going to be trying to take you out. And that's just a reality. A verse to keep in mind here is Jesus saying, if anyone would come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. For whoever would save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. This is This is hard for all of us, actually. Because I don't want a hard life. Do you guys want a hard life? I don't. I want the blessed life. I want bills to be paid. I want security for the future. I want health throughout. I want my kids to not make a mess of their life. And I want to look good to the outside world. Like, that'd be nice, right? Throw in some sun, some good weather, some leisure activities. That sounds great. But when Jesus says, take up my cross and follow me, that means there's areas of your life that you have to deny yourself. Not fun. Self-denial is not fun because it's doing things that you'd rather not do. But I already feel like you guys as a group kind of have a leg up on this, because simply by being who you are and investing and pouring into other people requires self-denial. Because there's other things you could be doing on a Saturday morning or a Friday night than being on the sideline and trying to run this drill, make sure all these kids get here and stay alive at this time. So many other things that you could be investing your life in, but you're choosing to invest your life into other people. So you kind of have a leg up there, high five. Denying yourself, taking up your cross also requires risk, because you don't know how things are going to work out. Taking Jesus seriously, taking that next right step of faith is going to be a risky one, because there's no guarantee on the other side. What are people going to say? What are people going to think? What does this mean? Am I going to get canceled? All of these fears can rush through our mind. But those are two reasons why it's difficult to not take Jesus that seriously, to be cozy and comfortable in our church bubble and just hopefully everything's fine until we meet Jesus. Jesus wants us out of that bubble. He wants to pop those bubbles. But it's going to be tough. And a talking point in this regard could actually be something as simple as sharing about a step of faith that was hard for you. What's the last thing you had to do for Jesus in his name because he put it on your heart that was hard? Let him know. Let them know. And maybe that'll spark something in their world. Well, there's been this step of faith that I've been struggling with that I think I need to take, and it's going to be hard, but I'm not alone in this. And this is also another heart check for us, because if it's been a hot minute before we've had to do something that we would consider hard or difficult, it might be time to consider where we might be walking with Jesus. Because it's not a super easy cakewalk when it comes to walking by faith. So all of that to say, and I'll bring it and I'll close it down here, and I'll pray for you guys before we wrap, is I believe without a shadow of a doubt that God is aligning you in this very moment on the very team or the next field you're on or the next classroom you're in. He's aligning this moment with these people for a reason. The all-stars, the no-stars, the wish they weren't on your team kids, the whole thing. They're all there for a reason. Part of it is helping them work together, build character, build culture, get wins. But God has wins in mind for every person there, right there in that X. And I believe without a shadow of doubt that you're there to help them take that next step. And I don't know what the next step is going to be for any of your athletes or any of the kids on the field. No idea. Here's the thing. I don't need to know. And actually, you might not even need to know. Because what we do know is everybody has a next right step of faith to take. And you're here in this time to help them take it. And if we built that kind of culture, come on somebody. We're going beyond sport. We're building a kingdom. But who says we can't do better?